Hello everyone and welcome to the lesson recap video for February 13th. Now just a quick update. The due date for inquiring and analyzing has been pushed back from, what was it, February 28th, I believe, to March 12th. This is due in part to the extension of the school closure. And guys, we're aiming at a moving target here. If the school closure continues beyond a certain point, and I don't know where that point is just yet, we will have to rethink this thing such that the course is no longer about robotics, it's about C programming. So we'll try to make that decision as soon as we can. So note that today the school announced that Board of Education extended the school closure to March 16th, I believe, 2 weeks beyond March 2nd. Okay, now in this exercise review, I don't want to go over this again. I covered that down in the recap for February 11th. And I discussed what we did in the first 4 exercises. So see that for the review of the exercises. Today we're going to introduce exercise 5, and that includes the if statement. And we'll look at the instructions in a second. Your homework or practice for tonight is to work on the 5 exercises. Today is Thursday, so you have until the following Monday, to work on these. And I'm just going to edit this page. I don't like that extra blank line in there. Can I do that? Yeah, I can. And I'm just going to do, whoops. Okay, what happened there? Let's do this and that, save it. Yeah. And then for next time, can you watch this video on compound if statements? So this is for making more complex decisions than we will talk about today. So let's look at the exercises, the instructions for exercise 5. So in this exercise, you're going to write a program that prompts the user for a number, and depending on the number from the user, you will display a certain square. So the prompt says, enter a 1 for a triangle, 2 for a square. In this case, the user entered a 1, so we showed a triangle. In this case, the user entered a 2, so we showed a square. Now, if you had 100 shapes, well, then you could say, enter a number from 1 to 100, and then you would display the appropriate shape. So in this exercise, you'll learn how to make decisions using the if-else statement. That decision is going to be used to, well, if the user entered a 1, I need to do this code to display this. If the user entered a 2, I need to run the code that displays this. So you watched 3 videos on if-else statements for homework. Those are listed over here on the February 11th homework. So that's about 15 minutes of videos. Please watch it carefully. There's a minor error by the speaker at minute 4:30 of the first video. It's nothing major, but he just states something incorrectly, and see if you can spot it. So let's come back to the instructions over here. Now in this exercise, you're going to use variables, and you're going to use the scanf function, and I'll have more to say about this in a minute. And you'll use the if-else statement to make a decision, and then you will use your shape display functions from exercise 3. So you come back over to here, copy paste the code from here into exercise 5. And as this is what your output will look like. Now, the challenge, okay, let's just talk about this. So your program is, as I said, is going to use a printf to display this prompt to the user. And then it's going to use the scanf function to read something from the keyboard. And that something is going to be a whole number, in this case a 1 or a 2. Now, if a challenge exercise down here is, what if the user enters something besides a 1 or a 2? Well, a program that was robust would reject that. Now, if you write the program as stated here, and you enter a 3, well, the program wouldn't do anything and would just end. Well, that's not really a graceful ending. You want to alert the user that the 3 was not a valid input number. And so you could extend the program so it rejects invalid input from the user. Now, another way to extend this is to make the program loop, asking the user to continually enter a shape number, and then end the program when the user enters a 3. So if I keep entering 1, it'll keep on displaying triangles. If I keep on entering 2, it'll keep on displaying squares. And if I eventually enter a 3, the program will stop. Now what happens if I enter a 4? Well, that's where this comes in. You would tell the user, hey, 4 is not a valid entry. And then also, well, over here, you would report back to the user, instead of displaying a shape, you would say, hey, that number is invalid, and then go back to the prompt again. So now, let's see, is that the end of the instructions? It is. We got an extra blank page in here. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, okay. So now, based on these videos that you watched for homework last night, this should give you enough information on how to use the if to make the decision about what to do. I got a 1, what do I do? I got a 2, what do I do? Well, it's asking, your program is going to make the test, is the incoming value from the user a 1? If so, execute the display triangle. Is the input from the user a 2? If so, execute the display square code. Now you're going to call functions on these. You're not going to use your code. You will use functions. Now I want to say something about the scanf function. This function, scanf, is defined in the standard I/O library, just in the same way that the printf function is displayed. Now, the scanf function, as it says here, it returns the number of items that were successfully read. I'm going to just change this. It returns the number of arguments. Let's just change that. That were successfully read. Okay, for example, if scanf returns a 1, it means one value was read in. 2 means 2 values were read in, and so on. If scanf returns a 0, it means that no input was read in. Now, why would that be? Well, if you're asking the user for a number and the user types in a letter, well, it can't read that letter and store it in an integer. So it aborts the read and returns 0, indicating I didn't read anything. You can see more on this at this tutorials point website. So here's the code. So we have 2 variables. We're going to be 2 integers. The input is where we're going to store what the user typed at the keyboard. The result is going to be, now we don't need that 0, I don't think. I'm just going to take that out. The result is what we get back from the scanf function. So line 15, we're going to prompt the user to give us a number. Line 17, we then, once this prompt is displayed, your program just pauses. It calls this function, and it's now waiting for the user to enter a number. And that number Now, how does the program know a number is coming in? Because you've told it here with this format specifier. The scanf is looking for a decimal or a whole number. And when it comes in from the keyboard, it's stored in the input value, or the input variable over here. Now note that ampersand, that is the address of, is it an operator? Well, it indicates that this thing is a pointer. It's a pointer, or the address of this variable. If this turns out to be a proper C programming course, we'll talk more about pointers then. For the moment, just be aware that with scanf, you have to include this ampersand in front of the variable name that you're going to store the value in. So we're waiting for a decimal number to come in, a whole number. Now, if we do get a number from the user, scanf will say, okay, I read in one item. If the user were to type in the letter X, for example, well, it can't store the letter X in an integer, so that it would the scanning would fail, and scanf would return a 0 to indicate I didn't read anything in. So if you get a 0 back from scanf, you know something's wrong. So here we check the result. If the result is equal to 1, that means we read in one item, one whole number. And then we simply say, you entered the number, and then we echo the number, which is stored in input. We echo it back to the user. If the result was not 1, now this is not a, if the result was 0, we're expecting 1. If they entered, they didn't enter a number, or they entered a faulty character, an alpha character, then it would say your input is invalid. Try again. Now, as I'm reading this, I just realized that this is not quite right. Suppose the user entered 2 numbers. We're only expecting 1. It entered 2. Okay, well, with this, I'll test it. I didn't try that, but since this is the format specifier, we should only, even though the user types 2 numbers from the keyboard, we're only going to read the first one. So the result should still be 1. I'll try that when I run it. So, and then the program just returns 0. So let's run this. And I'll enter the number 444. Press enter. And it says you entered 44. So now if I press enter, the program will exit the console. Let's run it again. Excuse me. This time I'll enter the letter X, which is not a whole number. Press enter, and it says it's invalid. Now let's run it again and give it 2 numbers. So we'll give it 444 and 555. Let's see what happens. You entered 444. So just ignore the second one, because our format specifier string is only asking for 1 number. So this is how scanf works, and you will use this to get the shape number from the user. You can borrow this code and modify it as needed. Okay, that's it for now, guys, and see you next time. If you have any issues or problems, send your teacher a email or put something on the Google Hangout chat, and we'd be happy to have one-on-one video chat with you. Okay, bye-bye.